Welcome to the penultimate Paper Mario soundtrack review. Today we're looking at the two most controversial games in the series, Paper Mario Sticker Star, released on the Nintendo 3DS in 2012, and Paper Mario Color Splash, released on the Wii U in 2016. Now I think it's important to address, especially with these games, just what exactly these reviews are judging. This is not a review of gameplay. The game's overall quality is not what I'm judging here. But it is important to realize that the mechanics of a game just necessarily inform how the music is written and how it's used within the game itself. You wouldn't apply the calm, hourly music of Animal Crossing to Mario Kart, nor would you take the dramatic, story-driven music of a Final Fantasy game and apply it to Tetris. Although, admittedly, a Tetris game designed around that level of drama would be pretty fun. So with all that said, Sticker Star and Color Splash are very different games mechanically and tonally from the first three entries. Those games had tracks primarily based on locations and characters, and so musical diversity and continuity stemmed from diverse locations and continuity within the story. The newer games are less concerned with these overarching story and world elements so much as they are with the moment-to-moment gameplay experience, evidenced by the level-by-level world map structure of each game. Speaking of world maps, let's dive right into Sticker Stars. In Sticker Star, each of the game's regions gets a unique world map theme. Here's the default arrangement for the grass world. Notice which instruments hold the melody. For the A section, it's a flute. The move to the B section brings the melody into an accordion, which has a noticeably harsher timbre from the flute before it. From here, each version takes the same melody and structure and applies a different instrumentation. The desert version, for example, utilizes a sitar for the melody and some various talking drums in the accompaniment. These Middle Eastern and African sounds are a common way to evoke the desert. However, for the B section, the composers make the same move to a harsher timbre by utilizing a saxophone. Saxophones are incredibly versatile when it comes to timbre, so take note of the particularly harsh tone coming from this sample. I think bringing in a saxophone is a great call here on the part of the composer. Sticker Star consistently uses jazz music throughout the whole soundtrack, so if the composers had decided to stick to the more traditional deserty instrumentation, a la New Super Mario Bros. U, not only would it sound incredibly cliched, but it wouldn't feel at home in the world of Sticker Star. That being said, these tracks are still pretty cliche, but that's more a fault of the choice in worlds than the music itself. It's also worth noting the adaptive music technique at play here. This is the first instance of a vertical layering technique since the original N64 game. Vertical layering is an adaptive technique where multiple tracks play simultaneously, but the volume of one or more of these tracks is dependent on conditions in the game. In this case, each version of the world map theme is faded in or out depending on the player's position in the world map. Color Splash's world isn't as nicely divided as Sticker Star's, so the track per world model wouldn't really apply well to it, or at best would be entirely impractical to create. So instead, Color Splash takes it as an opportunity to create a sense of progress through the game. When you start out, the world map theme is just a bass guitar and some light drums. As you complete the game and collect big paint stars, more instruments join the mix. First a piano adds, playing chords, and occasionally a riff from the game's main theme. Then a guitar. Notice how, while each new mix features a single instrument, none of the previous instruments disappear from the arrangement. They merely rest back into the rest of the ensemble. If you're listening carefully, you may have also noticed that each track is in a different key. Each big paint star you collect bumps the entire arrangement up by a half step. So while at the beginning of your journey you start in the key of E, by the end, you'll be soaring up an entire tritone into the key of B flat. Rising half-step modulations like this are super common, and when used in most pieces, it gives a considerable boost in energy and forward momentum. When used over the course of the game, it helps foster a sense of accomplishment and scale that I honestly find incredibly effective. And since it isn't tied to any world themes, the composers had the freedom to make each track as enjoyable as possible. Sticker Star does something genuinely impressive with battle music. Every battle theme in the game has a low HP version that plays when the player is down to a dangerously low portion of their health. And I can't stress enough that every battle theme in the game has a version like this. Now, I really like the idea behind this, and I've seen similar techniques used in games before. Parappa comes to mind. But I think Sticker Star takes it just a bit too far in execution. It's a little too annoying to be effective comically, but likewise far too silly to try and make the player anxious, like the low health beeps you see in Legend of Zelda games, among others. It's a good concept, and the scale of it is definitely admirable, but I think it's just a bit over the top. It reminds me a bit of Yoshi's New Islands OST, which sometimes tries so hard to be cutesy that it just comes off as irritating. Color Splash does the same thing with its battle music, but generally I find its implementation a little more tasteful than in Sticker Star. For one, Color Splash's music, not just in these battle themes, has a lot higher fidelity than Sticker Star. This is mostly because Color Splash has the advantage of live musicians and a more powerful console. The over-exaggerated low HP music certainly isn't the only example of a tonal mismatch in Sticker Star. The first world's final level, Goomba Fortress, has a strangely subdued track that honestly gives off spy thriller vibes, especially thanks to that slick vibraphone. This is kinda inappropriate though. There's hardly any puzzles, the most thought-challenging part is simply remembering to press the Paperize button, and between those segments you're under fire from bob-ombs. This level just isn't trying to make the player feel stealthy, despite what the music might suggest. So when the music cuts out upon reaching the central tower, it can't successfully create suspense, as silence is often used to create. Instead, it just kills the small amount of energy this level had in the first place. This isn't the only example. I also find the desert music pretty stale and overused. I wish they had a different track for the Yoshi Sphinx level in particular, but then again, Sticker Star isn't super concerned with its locations so much as it is with the moment-to-moment events and surprises. A considerable portion of its soundtrack is dedicated to these moments. For instance, there's a track exclusively for 2 times when you have the option to pay off a group of Goombas who are harassing a Toad. While Color Splash puts a lot more work into its locales, including the music, it carries this same focus on event-based music as Sticker Star does. This same mentality can also be seen with the Thing music. As if to emphasize how out of place these things are meant to be, the Thing tracks are often completely unrelated to the musical identity of these games as a whole. All these tracks are pretty short, but that's okay. Their main purpose is to quickly inject some energy or emotion into a scene. Occasionally, like with the Sticker Star Goomba Gang example, they're also used to connect similar events together. Both games utilize leitmotif quite respectably. It's not quite as impressive as the story-informing combining leitmotifs in Super Paper Mario, but it's still important. Of course, this really only applies to the main cast. Kirsty gets a theme that, not to spoil anything, is used well near the end of the game. Mario in both games is generally represented with classic Mario platformer music, especially the overworld theme from the original Super Mario Bros. Kamek gets a fantastically sleazy plunger-muted trumpet, and a theme that appears in overworld and battle variants. Bowser, too, gets a dramatic motif that slides right into the rock genre most of his tracks fall into. Color Splash actually does a great job by taking these last few themes, as well as tracks like the end of chapter intermissions, and readapting them into a live recorded setting. Sticker Star, in another outlier for both games, gives minor character Wiggler a surprisingly fleshed out musical identity. You can hear his leitmotif initially in the track Wiggler's Sleepy Time. See how the same melody is adapted to his main character theme. An angry theme. And even a battle theme. As much as I personally disliked World 3, I have to admit this character was very well implemented from a musical standpoint. So far I've been mostly positive about, but still fairly critical of both games' soundtracks. But, just to wrap things up, I want to talk about my favorite part from either game. Now typically in game development, a composer will be brought in near the end of a project when much of the game is already completed. As a result, music almost always has to adhere to the gameplay rather than the other way around. However, every now and then developers will consider music and create gameplay from there. This boss fight, Gooper Blooper, is an example of that in practice. This boss has 5 different phases and moves between them with a horizontal adaptive music technique. I love intricate music systems like this that are woven into the animation and gameplay. It certainly doesn't hurt that the phases themselves score the action pretty well. Just listen to the difference between the intense penultimate poison phase as compared to the joyful Mario-themed romp in the final phase. It's absolutely fantastic. Sticker Star has great moments like these, but it's unfortunately dragged down by a few missed opportunities and mismatched tones. The soundtrack then is not dissimilar to the game itself. It's incredibly witty and charming at best, but monotonous and frustrating at worst. Considering all those clever uses of adaptive music techniques, memorable character themes, and overall soundtrack continuity, I have to give Sticker Star's soundtrack a 6.5 out of 10, in spite of its flaws. What then about Color Splash? As mentioned, Color Splash is very similar musically to Sticker Star, and so shares many of the same strengths. The rhythmic boss battle mechanic even makes a return in the Windy fight, although the adaptive systems are not present in this instance. However, much like the rest of the game, Color Splash improves on many of Sticker Star's musical shortcomings. More locations get their own distinct yet memorable music tracks, and each track is used appropriately to score the action. It certainly doesn't hurt that the performances give a major fidelity boost to the soundtrack. For that, and especially for the adaptive techniques it continues to use, I rate Color Splash's soundtrack an 8 out of 10. Welcome to the end of the video. Color Splash was the first Paper Mario game that I managed to beat all the way through, and despite that familiarity, or perhaps because of it, this has been the hardest video of the 3 to write so far. There's still a few things I had to leave out, like the vertical layering in Port Prisma, or the truckload of classical Mario references in both games. I guess you can consider that an honorable mention, at least. If you have a favorite track from these games, or any other strong opinions for that matter, feel free to share them in the comments below. Like, subscribe, bell, etc., etc. Now then, I can finally start playing Origami King. I'll see you next time.